Gentlemen, importune me no farther, for how I am firmly resolved you know, that is, not to bestow my youngest daughter before I have a husband for the elder. What? Will you not suffer me? Nay, now I see. She is your treasure. She must have a husband. I must dance barefoot on her wedding day. And for your love to her, lead apes in hell.
One of the things that I think it's very tempting to do with Catherine and Petruchio is to pit them against each other and to try to pick a winner and a loser, a hero and a villain, the person who is justified in their toxic actions and the person who isn't. And this is in fact what all of their friends and families are doing in society at large, is pitting them against each other. That is the whole purpose of their marriage, to take two people who society view as undesirable or hostile or disturbing in some way and put them together so that they're too busy fighting each other to constitute a threat to anybody else. But Catherine and Petruchio managed to transcend that, to become better than that through love, by playing in to some of the stereotypes that the people around them thrust onto them. They managed to escape it and to become more powerful. So I think in this play, like in marriage and life in general, trying to pick winners and losers and who's right and who's wrong is not particularly useful. And ultimately, Catherine and Petruchio figure out how to play by their own rules. I think that's their greatest arc, is taking some time away from society with each other and somehow becoming more than they were separately. And despite the disturbing elements of Taming of the Shrew, I can't help but find that there is something wildly romantic in that idea. Just the smell of the buttermilk and beets and vanilla at this stage. Oh my gosh, it smells so good to me. Makes me so hungry. shameless liquor baking utensils. Even when the cake batter contains mainly raw beets. Oh, still so good. I think in some ways, The Taming of the Shrew is about children coming of age into adulthood who have been radically disappointed by their parents, specifically their fathers. I think Catherine and Petruchio both have this in common. It's more obvious for Catherine, just in the way her father will listen to the suitors saying terrible things about her, comparing her to a devil and all sorts of disrespectful things, and won't defend her. She's his daughter, and he does nothing. He listens to the way they talk about her right in front of his face and does nothing to defend her. He doesn't listen to her. He obviously, very, very obviously, favors Bianca. So, I mean, I think a lot of her rage stems from that. And I think it's very hard to tell where this pattern of behavior started. Whether it started with her being a little difficult and he became more hostile and then she became more hostile, or whether it started with him favoring Bianca from the beginning and turning her into what she is now. And for Petruchio, I think it's more subtle. But to me, the question I have is, he's clearly hanging out with these rich kids. His father just died, and he has no money. What happened? What happened to the fortune? Why did his father pass away without leaving him a single cent? What's the story there? Why does he now need to whore himself out and marry a rich woman in order to survive? So I definitely think there's a story there in terms of Petruchio's past and his relationship with his father, and even the way he brushes off his father's death, the way he refuses to talk about it, to express grief at all. Doesn't seem to be a single monologue about the darkened clouds over him. The experience of grieving, of missing his father, of thinking if my father was here, nothing. Shakespeare is so verbose, but he couldn't spare a single passage for that, when Lucentio got that whole passage on how he was going to study really hard. A lot of words spent on explaining how he was going to focus on his studies right before he fell madly in love with Bianca, apparently. So yeah, I think it's more subtle with Petruchio, but I definitely think there's a story of disappointment there, and I think that's something that Catherine and Petruchio both have in common, being drastically disappointed by the adults in their life. And there was a line in there somewhere about the youth beguiling the older people with their cunning. I don't remember the exact quote, but that seems to be a lot about what the play is, a transfer of power from the older generation to the youth who are still under their control, and the younger generation trying in different ways to claim some kind of control over their lives, some kind of autonomy, independence, and empowerment. And I think that's true for the men and the women in this story equally, perhaps in different ways, but the basic emotional backbone of the story is the same, I think, for Caterina and for Petruchio and for all of them.
Married? So I mean, sweet Katharina, in thy bed. And therefore, setting all this chat aside, thus in plain terms, your father hath consented that you shall be my wife, your dowry breed on, and will you, I will marry you. Now, Kate, I am a husband for your turn, for by this light whereby I see thy beauty that doth make me like thee well, thou must be married to no man but me, for I am he, am born to tame you, Kate, and bring you from a wild Kate to a Kate conformable as other household Kates. Here comes your father. Never make denial. I must and will have Katharina to be my wife.
So we're in the last scene of Act 2, I believe, and Petruchio and Catherine have just met for the first time, and Catherine has just assaulted the music teacher. And Petruchio says, "Now, by the world, it is a lusty wench. I love her 10 times more than e'er I did. Oh, how I long to have some chat with her." And what's interesting to me is I look at this line and I wonder how genuine this is. Is this, for Petruchio, seeing her physically assault this music teacher, this man, is that the point where he starts to feel genuine affection for Catherine? Is that the point where he thinks that maybe they might actually be a match, that she might be a good woman for him beyond her fortune? Or is this something he says for the benefit of Baptista, who he is currently, I feel like he's relishing jerking this man around. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like Catherine rebels by being as unpleasant as possible, and Petruchio rebels by being as pleasant and agreeable as possible with people who maybe don't have the most respect for him and who he doesn't have the most respect for. So two people who feel deeply displaced in their society and are coping with that in opposing but equally unhealthy ways. But anyways, back to my initial point. I'm very interested in trying to figure out the exact point where these two characters start to have feelings for each other. So here, Baptista's next line is, "Well, go with me and be not so discomfited. Proceed in practice with my younger daughter." So he's talking to the music teacher here. He goes back to talking to Hortensio. He doesn't reply to Petruchio. So really, and this is the thing, is that these plays were transcribed from kind of what would have been done on stage. And so we're missing a lot of information from the notes that were taken. So it's impossible to really say whether Petruchio was talking directly to Baptista or whether he was just talking to himself. So the exact nature of this line is really slippery, as is the exact nature of Petruchio. Throughout the play, Catherine and Petruchio are both repeatedly compared to devils. And in the wedding scene, Petruchio punches the priest, and it's explained that the book that the priest was holding, potentially the Bible, falls to the floor, and he also seems to be getting drunk in the church. It seems to imply that he is still at the church, having like a party in the church afterwards and getting boozy. And it says, he kissed her lips with such a clamorous smack that at the parting all the church did echo. So he's getting a little bit too sexual with his new wife, again, still in the church. So there seems to be this implication that there's almost something blasphemous about these two. Yeah, something unholy about this pair of people. And also that they're really pushing against the boundaries of good taste. It's interesting, the dynamic here, the power dynamic, that Petruchio is really pushing his luck, but everybody is just so desperate for this wedding to take place for their own reasons. You know, they're basically selling Catherine down the river. And, you know, the guys thought they were selling Petruchio down the river as well to, you know, marry this shrew wife so everybody else can get on with their little schemes and things. Yeah, so like technically this whole wedding thing was everybody else's idea, but now everyone is so desperate to get Catherine and Petruchio married and dealt with and kind of sent off to distract each other with how awful they each are, that they're willing to put up with pretty much anything just to get the wedding done and dealt with. And Petruchio really seems to be aware of that and pushing that. And I think there's almost this implication that his friend thought he was kind of playing Petruchio, and Petruchio knows that he's been used or played, and now he's just gonna freaking milk it. Like all of this nonsense that he does, I think maybe partly to mess with Catherine, but also I think even more importantly to mess with the other people around them. Yeah, I think so much of their relationship has to do with other people at this point. And it's interesting, in this part of the story, they're about to go off on their own, have some time away from like the families and friends, and that's when they really get cemented together. And then they come back and present themselves as this new couple, but it's like they really need that space to grow into themselves, because everybody else has kind of pegged them and created this narrative about them and has decided what they're useful for, how they can use these people in their own lives. And it's not until they escape that they have any chance of developing feelings for each other. Yeah, it's very interesting, I think. Another thing that I notice about the wedding scene is really interesting because we don't see it. It's told to us. So again, it's told to us by these people who we know already have ideas about Catherine and Petruchio, already have created this narrative about them. So it's hard to know how accurate this is. Is this an exaggeration? And even like, there's this bit where Tranio asks, "What said the wench when he rose again?" And Gremio said, "Trembled and shook." And I saw this, and I'm like, okay, she was trembling and shaking. The implication seems to be that it's from fear. But my instinct is like, is she trying desperately not to burst out laughing this whole time? Like, or is she like trembling with like lust? Like, it could be anything. The trembling and the shaking could mean a lot of different things in the context of a Shakespeare play. Women tremble and shake for many different reasons, according to Shakespeare. So that too, it's like this wedding scene. Yeah, it's hard to know, and I think again it kind of, that framing really illustrates how much their relationship has been bound by the views and the narratives of other people. All right, well, they're about to go off on their own. So, let's follow them. Let's follow them to Petruchio's house.
Thus have I politically begun my reign, and 'tis my hope to end successfully. My falcon now is sharp and passing empty, and till she stoop, she must not be full gorged, for then she never looks upon her lure. Another way I have to man my haggard, to make her come and know her keeper's call. That is, to watch her as we watch these kites that bait and beat and will not be obedient. The more my wrong, the more his spite appears. What? Did she marry me to banish me? Beggars that have come unto my father's door upon entreaty have a present aim. If not, elsewhere they meet with charity. But I, who never knew how to entreat, nor ever needed that I should entreat, am starved for meat, giddy for lack of sleep, with oath kept waking and with brawling fed, and that which spites me more than all these wants, he does it under name of perfect love, as who should say, if I should eat or sleep, 'twere deadly sickness, or else present death. I prithee, go, get me some repast, I care not what, so it be wholesome food.
So I'm back in the house now. Kids are home. I've got a few minutes before bedtime, and I'm at the point where Catherine and Petruchio are back at Petruchio's house. And the thing that I notice is that Petruchio seems to have this very informal relationship to his servants. They seem somewhat disorganized and quite informal. And even you see this early on with Petruchio's relationship to Grumio, that they seem to have this very informal relationship for master and servant. So I have like several questions. So I'm wondering, is part of the reason that his household is so disorganized possibly because he's been gone, he's been traveling for a long time? Or is it because he just had this really, really informal relationship with all of his servants back home? And his relationship to Grumio, to me, would suggest that he just wasn't really a figure of much authority. That maybe he didn't view himself as being particularly far above the servants. That also makes me wonder about his relationship with his father again, and whether maybe he was kind of somewhat oh, hello.
Grandma.
You want to talk to Grandma?
Yeah.
I'm not talking to Grandma. I'm shooting a video.
Thank you.
You want to be in the video?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm wondering is whether, like, again, I'm trying to figure out where these characters are kind of coming from, what the backstory is. So that makes me wonder if whether Petruchio was maybe more raised by the servants, going back to the idea that these are two characters that have been disappointed or let down by their father figures. I'm wondering whether Petruchio's father figure maybe didn't really see to his upbringing at all, whether he spent a lot of time hanging around the servants and developed these close relationships with them, closer than to people of his own rank, and now coming home with a wife. It's interesting that this man who clearly has never viewed himself as an authority figure or has never been much of a leader is now having to figure out how to take on this leadership role with her. I think for both their sakes. Yeah, controversial as his methods might be, I think ultimately his goal is to be able to function and survive in society in a better way with this woman. So the day is done, the play is done. It was shorter than I remembered, I'll say that. First of all, it felt like it went very, very quickly. And it's such a kind of ambiguous play. They all are. Shakespeare is famously ambiguous. But it's like your emotions are constantly swinging between having a great time and it's a party and it's hysterical and it's punny and you're living for it and it's sexy and it's romantic, and then suddenly you're like, yay, and then, oh. You're swinging from like joy to horror constantly. And it's very difficult to know like where you stand with any of these characters. I think both Petruchio and Catherine are very, very complex characters. Some of the most interesting characters in the Shakespeare comedies, for sure. And their relationship is so interesting and kind of about the joining of opposites. The way their marriage operates in society is like this joining of accepting convention and accepting traditional roles and using that to find freedom and to push against traditional roles. And the ending where Kate gives her classic speech, that's an owl over there. The kind of famous Kate speech where she's like, all you women need to submit to your men and all of this. On some level, it's like she's finally broken. They've got her. She is who they wanted her to be. But on another level, she's taking these women who have been mocking her, the widow, that very night in front of everybody, and her sister for presumably her whole life, and have been victimizing her. And she brings them low. She goes and she has her revenge on these women, and she does it through this this sense of complicity with her husband in a way that is socially acceptable, not in the way she used to, where she was fighting and striving and everybody said she was a she-devil. She does it in a way that no one can say anything about anymore because her husband told her to do this. Her husband instructed her to go get these women. So she gets her revenge and no one can say nothing to her anymore. So there's both this subjugation to the role that society has put on her and also this freedom through subjugation, this power that comes with that. And the way people play her end speech is totally different according to who you're talking to. Some people feel that it needs to absolutely be played straight, that this is really how she feels, and that if you don't play it, that it's coming from her heart,
you're ruining the romance of the play and the character development. The play is meaningless, regardless of kind of regardless of basically regardless of feminism and politics and anything else. Ultimately, you have to make the play about the characters and their development and not about society. Otherwise the play loses its tenderness and its meaning. And other people feel like it should be played sarcastic. It's been done that way, that it's her ultimate, act of to the world. And then some people play it, they play the whole Taming of the Shrew like it's a horror story, and they play it as a tragic moment that she's finally been broken down. I don't see it that way. I see it as being an ambiguous but definitely triumphant moment, and ultimately deeply romantic. Now, whether this speech is really for her husband or for the women, and whether it's because she believes all these things or because she wants to say, you women have been saying I'm shrewish, well, maybe you need somebody to say, you guys are the ones who are shrewish. Maybe you need to be put down the way you've put me down. Whatever it's for, I think it needs to be played with a certain honesty and a certain earnestness. Fie, fie, unknit that threatening unkind brow, and dart not scornful glances from those eyes, to wound thy lord, thy king, thy governor. It blots thy beauty, as frosts do bite the meads, confounds thy fame as whirlwinds shake fair buds, and in no sense is meet or amiable. A woman moved is like a fountain troubled, muddy, ill-seeming, thick, bereft of beauty, and while it is so, none so dry or thirsty will deign to sip or touch one drop of it. Such duty as the subject owes the prince, even such a woman oweth to her husband, and when she is froward, peevish, sullen, sour, and not obedient to his honest will, what is she but a foul contending rebel, and graceless traitor to her loving lord? I am ashamed that women are so simple to offer war where they should kneel for peace, or seek for rule, supremacy, and sway when they are bound to serve, love, and obey. Why, are our bodies soft and weak and smooth, unapt to toil and trouble in the world, but that our soft conditions and our hearts should well agree with our external parts? Come, come, you froward and unable worms, my mind hath been as big as one of yours, my heart is great, my reason haply more, to bandy word for word and frown for frown, but now I see our lances are but straws, our strength as weak, our weakness past compare, that seeming to be most which we indeed least are. Then veil your stomachs, for it is no boot, and place your hands below your husband's foot, in token of which duty, if he please, my hand is ready, may it do him ease.
Save the last wife shit for brains everywhere. Excuse me. Did you just say... I'll be right with you.
Oh my goodness.
It is. I was like,
Where two raging fires meet together, they do consume the thing that feeds their fury.